Hello, welcome to a new Unlimited 100 series, Spotlight on Electric. Every week we will go through a type or staples and outline some of the uses you can find in decks in Unlimited 100 or some ways that you could just use them in general. Okay, so let's start. The first Pokemon we're going to look at is Ampharos from Platinum with Damage Bind. Each Pokemon has any damage counters on it. Can't use poke powers. This is sort of like Muck or Garbodor. It's a power lock and it's kind of impressive. It works both ways, but if you run healing, then obviously you can just keep that onto, you can make sure that the lock is only applied onto your opponent's side. It's good to combo with Dusknoir to move their damage counters around, so if you just keep hitting the active, you can move the damage counters onto things like their Claydol and damage bind those, and its attacks are somewhat mediocre considering it's a stage 2, but it's mainly going to be a bench hitter. It's commonly used in an Ampharos deck, which I myself have used multiple times, and some others have decided to use Electric in general. Its attacks, Gigavolt, it's okay. Heads, you get 30 more, 30 plus 30, or tails, then you get to paralyze the defending Pokemon. And that's for 2 energy, and for the 3 energy type, Lightning, Colorless, 70 and moving energy card attached to Ampharos to one of your bench Pokemon. That's again not great, but if you need to do damage, then you can always do that. The weakness, Fighting plus 30. Fighting isn't commonly played in 100, so that's pretty good. And plus 30 obviously is a decent amount of damage, but it's not the times 2. Resistance to steel, minus 20, that's okay. Steel's occasionally played, so that's nice. And the retreat cost of 2, which is fine. If they look to bring up something, it's probably going to be a Claydol, not Ampharos. 130 HP, so it's quite bulky. And yeah, it's a very good card in Unlimited 100. So we've just talked about Ampharos from Platinum, and now we're going to talk about Ampharos from Dragons Exalted. It's 140 HP, and it has an ability, Electromagnetic Wall. As long as this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, whenever an opponent attaches an energy from his or her hand to one of his or her Pokemon, put 3 damage counters on that Pokemon. So the synergy is already starting to show. If this is active, which you probably want it to be, when they attach an energy, they're taking 30 damage onto the board without even from an attack. That's just for attached energy, which is what they want to do every turn of the game. It's very impressive, and it makes them think twice about where they want to attach the energy, because they don't really want to attach an energy to an attacker that has an ability, because that ability will immediately be gone because of damage bind, provided you have it out. So punching them for attaching energy, which is something they want to do, fantastic. And then its attack also has a lot of synergy with damage bind. Lightning, Colorless, Electro Bullet for 70 sounds like the other Ampharos attack, but it does 20 damage to any opponent's bench Pokemon. Now this snipe attack is very helpful, especially if you don't have Dusknoir and you don't plan to run it, because you can put the 20 damage onto the Claydol or one of the other bench hitters, and then that bench hitter is basically just useless now. And the 70 damage is decent. Now this one is an EX, which is something you need to take into note, and its weakness is Fighting times 2. Now again, Fighting isn't used that often, so it's not that much of a issue, and its retreat cost is 2. It can be awkward if this gets into the active spot with nothing to do with it, but the ability can carry it through and make it so it's not just completely useless. 140 HP is definitely nice. It's bulky, and especially because it's in the X, you'd want it to be bulky, you don't want it to give it up easy prizes. And of course, if you're against anything that uses a lot of energy on one turn, such as Emboar, Blastoise, or one of those strategies, it's very punishing for them. They can't really afford to keep putting that much damage onto the board if they're not one-hit KOing everything. So we've just talked about Ampharos, and now we're going to talk about the Electros then. it's important to talk about electric first, since there's a lot more splashable in so many different decks rather than just as a pre-evolution in an Electros deck. Now electric has 90 HP, it's a lightning Pokemon, obviously. Weakness of fighting ×2 and retreat cost of 2. As talked about previously, they're not that big of a deal. The retreat cost might be slightly more awkward now because it is a bigger target. Its attack is lightning, colorless, electric ball for 50, which isn't good, but it is a middle evolution, so the attack isn't used that often. And its ability, Dynamo. Once during your turn, you may attach a lightning energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon. Energy acceleration, fantastic. It's important for lightning because it doesn't have a lot of energy acceleration, so this is definitely a key card if you are looking to make an electric deck. It can lose tempo once it starts missing energy drops, or once some Pokemon have been knocked out. You don't have a lot of energy left on the board, and this can help to recycle them. So we've just seen electric, now let's see its fully evolved form, Electros. It has 140 HP and an ability, Energy Connect, which reads: as often as you like during the turn, you may move a basic energy card attached to one of your bench Pokemon to your active Pokemon. So basically you can synergize this with electric, where you put a lightning onto the bench, onto any of your Pokemon, then move it to the active. This means that you don't have to have the Pokemon you want to power up on the bench before moving it active, you can just have it active already. This helps especially when the Pokemon you want to attack with uses discarding as an effect of the attack or as its ability. Its attack is Electric Cannon for 2 lightning, 2 colorless, 8 plus damage. You may discard all lightning energy attached to this Pokemon. If you do, it does 50 more, so that's 130 damage. That's pretty decent in 100, but getting 4 energy onto it will take at least 2 turns from the attaching energy, electric, and then a DC the turn after, or keep using the electric's ability. So it's probably best to use as a bench hitter, but you can use it maybe to clean up games, because you can energy connect the energy that's already on the board to it active and then finish off. Weakness ×2 to fighting, as we said before, that's not too bad. Resistance, steel -20, again, not bad. Retreat cost of 3, which is kind of heavy, but you can always just stick a float stone on there if you need to. It's a card to consider, it's pretty good. And Ampharos also has this ability, so if you are looking to run a heavy Ampharos line, you can run that. If you are looking to run an Electros line, then run this one. Now we're on to the second Electros from Plasma Blast. It again has 140 HP, this is in the X, and its first attack is Crush and Burn for a lightning colorless, 30 times damage. Discard as many energy attached to your Pokemon as you like. This attack does 30 times the amount of energy cards you discarded. So this can hit for a lot, provided you have enough energy on the board to do that. Now again, this synergizes with the electric, its ability is getting more energy onto the board, and then you can Crush and Burn for a decent amount of damage, and you will have to have the 2 energy on Electros to use the attack. Its second attack is Lightning Triple Colorless and it's 50 times, you flip 4 coins and 50 times the number of heads. Now, again, this can hit 200 damage, but you need to flip 4 heads for that, so it's not very consistent. You probably don't want to use this attack as much as Crush and Burn, and you really want to use Crush and Burn if you can be guaranteed to get quite a lot of energy down on the board as fast as possible. So maybe using stuff that accelerates energy in attacks and things like electric. His weakness, again, it's fighting ×2, so that's not bad, and a retreat cost of 3, which is, again, kind of iffy, especially if you don't have energy on it, so it's not really going to do much. But it's another card to consider, and it's one of the better cards in the Electros line. Now we're going to move on to Luxray, and the first one we're going to talk about is Luxray from Next Destinies. It has 140 HP, which seems to be a common theme. and its first attack is Flash Impact for 60 damage for 1 lightning, and it does 20 damage to one of your Pokemon. You can prevent this using Mountain Ring or Mr. Mime, and it's a very cheap attack, so and energy efficient for quite a lot of damage, and it's very good. Crunch for 2 lightning and a colorless. It does 80 damage, and you flip a coin. If heads, discard energy attached to one of the defending Pokemon. Again, it's not too great. 80 damage for 3 isn't fantastic, but the potential energy discard is decent. It's mainly used for its first attack, I'd say. I wouldn't really use it for Crunch, especially if you only just commit 1 energy to the board with Flash Impact, and then you can power up something else. The weakness is ×2 to fighting, which again isn't bad, and its retreat cost is 1, which is very cheap, since you can just continually use Flash Impact, and then when it's in danger of being knocked out, you can retreat using that 1 energy. Now the next Luxray we're going to look at is from Legends Awakened. It has 120 HP, and it's more of a tech, I'd say. Its Pokebody is Rivalry. If your opponent has any Pokemon level X in play, each of Luxray's attacks does 50 more damage to the active Pokemon. Now, they don't have to have the level X active, which means if your opponent uses something like Uxie level X as an extra way of drawing and to get more value out of Uxie, then you can basically exploit that by doing a lot more damage for the same amount of energy. If level X's aren't like common in the decks that you play against, then this Luxray isn't fantastic. Its first attack is for a double colorless Plasma. Search your deck for a Lightning card, Lightning Energy card, and attach this to Luxray. It does 40 damage. It's not too bad, but the attack has to be, the energy attachment has to be building up to something. If it's just going to keep doing mediocre damage, then there's not much point putting so much energy on Luxray unless you can move it around with something like the Electros we previously talked about. Its second attack is Shock Bolt for 2 lightning and a colorless. It does 100 damage and discard all electric energy attached to Luxray. It again, 3 for 100 is okay. It kills some stuff, but not like the big basics such as Kyurem or Zekrom or Reshiram. And even with the Muscle Band, it's not hitting those numbers. So again, I wouldn't use it unless you can be sure that Rivalry will actually trigger. And then you can do 90 for 2 colorless or 150 for 3 energy, which is actually very good. Now the final Luxray we're going to talk about is from Flashfire. It is 140 HP, and its first attack is for Lightning and Colorless, Fang Snipe for 40 damage. Your opponent reveals his or her hand and discard a training card you find there. Now training card basically means item card in Unlimited 100, so you basically discard an item from their hand and you get to see what's in it. So it's a decent attack, it's relatively cheap, decent amount of damage, and you get the added benefit of discarding an item, which can be something that would have slowed you down, like energy removal, something that's planning to play like a Muscle Band, or something needed for later on, like Gust of Wind. So it's a decent attack, and its second one is Lightning Colorless for 120 damage, and its Luxray does 30 damage to itself. So with a Muscle Band, you are knocking out those big 130 HP basics that are common in the format, and whilst it does 30 damage to itself, which means you can't do it too many times without potentially knocking yourself out, bearing in mind you're going to take damage from your opponent, it is pretty good. And if you are worried about the self damage, you can always play something like Protect Cube, or I believe Hard Charm works with this as well. Weakness is ×2 to fighting, so as we talked, many of the electric Pokemon have a collective weakness to fighting, and it's actually not that bad, because since in Unlimited 100, fighting isn't played that common, apart from Claydol. The resistance is to Steel, -20 again, and resistance is good, and a retreat cost of 1, which is very cheap, and means you can keep some energy on Luxray if you planning on bringing it active and attacking with it. So now we're going to talk about Raichu from XY Base. It has 90 HP and is an EX. For a double colorless Circle Circuit, does 20 times the number of your bench Pokemon. It is 100 for a DCE max bench, but with the new addition of Skyfield, you can get 60 more damage from that. 160 max, plus a Muscle Band brings it up to 180. It's a very strong attack for just a double Colress, and its second attack for Lightning Colress is 100 and discard all energy attached to this Pokemon. It's not as good as Circle Circuit, considering you can do the same amount for less energy, but if you really can't afford that many bench Pokemon, then I guess you can use it, but mainly use this for its first attack, Circle Circuit. Its weakness and resistance are similar to the ones previously mentioned. The fighting times 2 is its weakness, and a resistance to steel minus 20. Its free retreat cost means that it's very helpful when you just need to promote something at the start of your turn. You can bring this active and then retreat to a different attacker once you've figured out what you will be able to do on the forthcoming turn. The next Raichu we're going to talk about is Raichu level X from Stormfront. Its Pokebody is Link Lightning and reads once during your turn when you put Raichu level X onto Raichu and use Voltage Shoot, which is its attack, you may use another attack of Raichu afterwards, and it can be used if Raichu is affected by a special condition. Now, this is an earlier adaptation of Omega Barrage that was recently printed in Primal Clash and is very helpful. 2 attacks a turn is great. Its attack Voltage Shoot, which you have to use to get the effect of Link Lightning, this is important, is Lightning Colress. Discard 2 Lightning Energy cards from your hand and choose when you punch Pokemon. This attack does 80 to that Pokemon. So it's 80 Snipe and you have to discard 2 Lightning Energy cards from your hand. Now, because it's a level X, it means that it can use any of the abilities, Poke Powers, Poke Bodies, and attacks from its previous stage that you leveled up from. So, if you level up the Circle Circuit Raichu we talked about, then you can use Voltage Shoot and then Circle Circuit on the same turn, which is very good. It also has free retreat and it has a weakness to fighting times 2 and the steel resistance of minus 20. Now, I would use Raichu as more of a tech or like just an attacker. I wouldn't build the whole deck around Raichu. I don't think it works that well as a deck, but if you can fit a 1-1-1 line of Raichu or maybe a 2-2-1 line including the level X, then I think it would be beneficial to many electric decks as an alternative attacker and one that can snipe. Transitioning now to Magnezone. Now, the first Magnezone we're going to talk about is from Plasma Storm. It's the Dual Brains one. It has 140 HP and its ability, Dual Brains, allows you to play 2 supporter cards a turn. Now, this means that you can play a lot more, shall we say, niche supporter cards, perhaps ones that you don't run in your other decks. So things like Team Flare Grunt, Xerosic, things like that. Things that aren't directly either helping you set up or draw cards. It allows you to diversify your supporter options and can mean that you can take your deck through a disruption path using cards like Team Flare Grunt and Energy Removal and Crushing Hammer to deny your opponent energies, or tanking strategies using Pokemon Center Lady and cards like that, just to heal all your Pokemon. It's a very versatile ability, and at worst it just lets you play 2 support cards a turn. You can't really complain. Its attack, Gyro Ball for 2 lightning and a Colress, it does 80, and then you switch Magnezone with one of your bench Pokemon, and your opponent switches the defending Pokemon with one of their bench Pokemon. So it's constantly rotating, and it helps because Magnezone's retreat cost is 3, which isn't great. So you can get it out the active spot by using its attack instead. Although you may want to just use this as a bench sitter with an attack just to get something big out of the way. Maybe if they have got a Mega out, as they are becoming slightly more popular in the format, then you can just do 80 to it, put it on the bench, and perhaps save yourself for a turn. Its weakness is fighting times 2, and again, that's not bad. It is a plasma Pokemon, so there is some synergy there. If you were to, I don't know, maybe use the Plasma Frigate to remove its weakness, Chorus Machine to power it up, because you can run 6 Plasma Energy in a unlimited 100, that is one of the rules. So it's a versatile card, and if you are looking to just run a deck that you need to go through your deck a lot, go through a lot of cards, this is an option. If you want to run a Magnezone deck, this is definitely an option. It's very versatile and it can fit into a lot of different decks. Now the other Magnezone I'm going to talk about today is Magnezone Prime from Triumphant. It is an EX, to get that out of the way now. It has a Poke Power of Magnetic Draw. Once you're in your turn, you may draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. And its attack is for lightning colours. Put as many energy cards attached to your Pokemon as you like in the Lost Zone. This attack does 50 damage times the number of energy cards put in the Lost Zone this way. So this is slightly better than Electros, in the fact that you only need 4 to do 200 damage, which is pretty much killing everything in the format, bar some Megas. And then you only need 1 more energy to do that. It has a built-in draw engine, which is helpful because you probably will already be running Claydol or a Pidgeot or something similar, so just having a way of drawing extra cards is always nice. Its weakness is fighting times 2, and its resistance is steel minus 20. Again, both of those are fine. Retreat cost of 3, which is somewhat nasty, but you can always just use a switch to get it out of the way if you need to. Now, I'd run Magnezone in a deck purely about Magnezone. If you want to run this Magnezone Prime, this is because it spans 2 different types in Electric and Steel. It has a lot of different ways to recover the energy, anything that you might get rid of, and it's a well supported line. The Magnetons do things, there are some Magnemites that are helpful. Magnezone is a well supported line, so don't really need to sacrifice that in order to just go for consistency, as this is the most consistent option. Now, you could run it in a deck sort of like the one that was running in Standard at that time, using Magnezone and something like Embo, and then just constantly using Lost Burn to one-shot everything your opponent has and win the game that way. In that case, you probably don't want to run as many Magnezones, and you want to basically improve the consistency of the deck so it isn't very hard to get both Embo and Magnezone going at a reasonable time in the game, so that you can actually start attacking before your opponent sets up and beats you anyway. So there are a lot of ways to run Magnezone. It is a very versatile Pokemon, it has a lot of support, and it's definitely something you should be considering if you want to run an Electric deck, a Steel deck, which we will get to in a couple of weeks, or just a deck that will one-shot a lot of things, like a very powerful deck. So now we're moving into more tech attackers, or just general attackers that are most splashable into Electric decks. The first one we're going to talk about is Zebstrika, which has 90 HP and has an attack disconnect for lightning colours, which does 40 damage, and item locks your opponent for a turn. Now, as we know from Standard, item lock is very powerful. The same goes for unlimited 100. It does more damage than Quaky Punch, and although it is on a stage 1, it does put out enough damage to halt your opponent and just is very oppressive. Now, it can slow your opponent down for you to get set up, it can help you solidify a lead. It's just a very versatile card. It does have a second attack, which is Lightning Colourless. Discard all Lightning energy attached to this Pokemon and does 80 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So it can snipe for 80 damage, which is nice. It kills the Claydol outright. It can kill some other bench sitters. It can kill stuff like Spiritomb, Dunsparce, Uxie, stuff that's been left on the bench from the start of the game that they couldn't get rid of. As a fighting weakness times 2, which isn't that much of a problem, and it has no retreat cost, which again is very nice. It is just a general tech you can put in pretty much any Electric deck, just a 1-1 line, and it will do well for you. So now we're going to talk about Thunderous from Furious Fists. It has 120 HP and it has 2 attacks. The first attack for a lightning colorless does 30 plus damage. If the opponent's active Pokemon has a tool attached to it, it does 30 more damage. It's a decent little attack. 2 for 60 is nice. They might have a tool on them, they might not. 2 for 30 isn't great, but the second attack is what the mill are going to be used for. Lightning colorless, 100 damage. This Pokemon can't use Lightning Slam during your next turn. Now, this is very good. It can do 120 with a Muscle Band. If you run lazy, you can hit the 130. And it's not like some of the other attacks we've seen for 100 damage, where you completely crippled the turn after you've lost all your energies. You just can't use Lightning Slam next turn, which can be rectified by bringing it back to the bench, then retreating back into it. You can use Lightning Slam twice, effectively, if you just have the switch and a free retreat Pokemon. Or you can just use Raging Thunder Punch and then 2-shot the 130 HP big basics in the format, or 2-shot the big stage 2 Pokemon that are common as well. The weakness and resistance are pretty much the same as all the other ones. Weakness is fighting times 2, steel minus 20 for resistance, and it's a 1 retreat cost, which is very cheap. It is a very decent attacker, and I would put it in pretty much every electric deck. Yeah, another big basic attacker we're going to talk about is Zapdos from Roaring Skies. It's 120 HP, has 2 attacks. The first attack, 20 damage, just a lightning. Cheap, it's not great. Can go up to 40 for 1, which is alright. Its second attack is melee, again what you want to use it for. Lightning colorless, 120 damage, and it does 40-20 of bench Pokemon. So it's similar to Zekrom, only it's better. The fact that you can just completely nullify the effect of the attack through Mountain Ring, Mime, so it's just 120 damage. And again, you can boost that to 140, which knocks out most stage 2s and big basics. It's just fantastic. For 3 energy, great. Its weakness is to lightning times 2, so it's not great in the mirror. But obviously, you have a common weakness to fighting, so this actually is very good to play against fighting, as it has a resistance to it, minus 20. So if you are up against like a Donphan deck or something like that, then you want to use that as your main attacker. It has a 2 retreat cost, which is kind of, it's meh, but you can obviously work around it. It's a very good attacker, and I would use it again in pretty much every deck. You can power it up in a couple of turns, and it does a lot of damage for not a lot. So the next card we're going to talk about is Zekrom from Black and White, Next Destiny's Legendary Treasure. It's been printed a lot. It's a card that kind of polarizes opinion, and in my opinion, you shouldn't run it. My opinion sounds weird because it did have a big effect on the standard for quite some time, and it looks good, but I think it's kind of a noob trap to people new to the format. Now, it has 130 HP, it's an EX, which is important to note, and its first attack for a double colorless is Outrage, 20 plus, 10 more damage for each damage count in this Pokemon, so it can hit up to 140 for a DCE, or slightly more if you're in something like a Giant Cape or an Expert Belt. And then its second attack for lightning colorless, 120 damage, and it does 40 to itself, which is similar to Zapdos. Its weakness is to fighting times 2 and has a 2 retreat cost. So let's talk about why I don't think this card is good. I recognise you can do a lot of damage using Outrage, and Bolt Strike is not a bad attack. My problem with it is Outrage works on Zekrom having a lot of damage on it, and you're not really going to be running damage swap in a deck like Electric. It just doesn't synergise that well. If you want to run damage swap with stuff like Outrage, by all means, but then you're not really looking at an Electric deck. Now, trying to get damage on Zekrom without it getting one shot is quite hard. Enough damage for Outrage to actually be workable. Your opponent's not going to just like willingly do like 40 to 50 damage to Zekrom and try and just like soften it up a bit, because they know that it's going to come right back and hit you a lot harder for just a double colourless. So outrage won't be used for these really high numbers unless you get incredibly lucky, or your opponent isn't that good, or is forced to make a suboptimal play. Now Bolt Strike, okay, you can stop the 40 damage to itself using Protection Cube, great, and then it's 3 for 120. Now, and I said that was good, remember? But there's no point using this over Zapdos, because whilst you can stop what Zapdos does as well, if you are running Mountain Ring or Mr. Mime, you're also stopping something your opponent can do. The cards that you're using to make Zapdos more beneficial have more value outside of just Zapdos. If you're playing Protect Cube and the only card that does damage to itself in your deck is Zekrom, the second you don't have a Zekrom, that's 2 cards dead in your deck. That's Zekrom dead, and that's Protect Cube dead. Whereas your opponent might be sniping the bench, so Mime is nice to have, or your opponent might have an Aqua Stadium out, so you want to replace it with Mountain Ring, and then the added benefit of not doing damage to your bench is helpful because you're using Zapdos. The other reason is Zekrom is an EX that has 10 more HP than Zapdos, which is not an EX, and they both pretty much cap out at the same amount of damage. Well, why not just use Zapdos? They're both probably going to get knocked out. If your opponent can hit 120, they can probably hit 130, and Zapdos gives you an attack with a different weakness other than fighting that isn't just going to immediately get one shot by a Donphan or a Machamp or a Rhyperior, but Zekrom is. So you're basically giving your opponent 2 free prizes, and you can't really stick it active and just hope they hit into it, because they'll just catch you around it. I mean, if you want to run this in a Donphan deck, by all means, but don't use Zekrom in a deck that is purely based around electric Pokemon. I don't think it's that good. So that's kind of a reason behind it. I do think it's kind of a noob trap. It does look good, but when you dive further into the format and think about some of the other cards you can pick, I think that it doesn't stand the test of time, because now they've started to print better cards like Thundurus and Zapdos, which aren't counted as EXs in this format, which may come in relevance because then your opponent might have to play the 9 prize game if they knock out Zapdos, rather than just taking 4 knockouts on the X's and taking 8 prizes. You force them to take 9 prizes. So there's basically my thoughts on the electric type and some of the staples and interesting cards from that type that you can use to run in decks. Now this hopefully will be a weekly segment, a weekly video on the channel, going through all the different types, and then we will eventually get to staple trainers and then staple Pokemon in the format, and hopefully just try and basically make people think about cards they may have forgotten about, make people aware about other cards, and also try and clear up some misconceptions about cards such as the Zekrom I've just covered, and basically give people more information about the format. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe if you liked it. If you didn't, give us feedback, that would be very helpful, and thanks for watching. Bye.